Hey, this week we talk about how Linux can help you clean up after a ransomware incident, how NVIDIA is making pigs fly, why Rocky is going mainline, and why you might be excited about ARM64 browsers. You don't want to miss it, so stay tuned.
Podcasts you love.
From people you trust. This is TWiT.
This is the Untitled Linux Show, episode 148, recorded April 20th. Gonna cost 64 ARMs. Hey folks, it is Saturday, and you know what that means. It's time for Linux. It's time to get geeky about the news and the tips and all things Linux. It's going to be a lot of fun. Get in here. Let's get started. It is not just me, of course. I've also got Rob. I've got Jeff. It's most of the regular crew. It's the three of us today, but that's all right. We are sure to have fun, and we are sure to have some stories to cover and things to talk about. And we're going to let Rob kick us off with, is this another distro hop, Rob?
It kind of is. It's not going to be my daily driver, but it is something to check out. So this week on the Distro Hoppers Corner, I'm going to talk about CSI Linux. CSI Linux is a distribution focused on digital forensics, the type of distro you may want to utilize after a cybersecurity incident. And quite coincidentally, I've been dealing with a ransomware event this past week myself.
Oh,
fortunately, they had good backups. Good backups were in place. Security measures weren't too horrible. It could have been better.
Obviously.
So that did help to minimize the impact and the downtime and all that, but it's still a good idea to analyze the environment and the system after an incident to look at, is there a persistent threat out there that you might have missed? So this work, that I was doing with this incident was mostly done by the time I came across CSI Linux. So I haven't yet had the opportunity to really utilize it on a live incident. And I wasn't out looking for a distro like this. It somehow just came up in an unrelated discussion in my social webs, kind of how the social just knows what you want, and all of a sudden the algorithm pulls it up for you, and like magic. So, and it wasn't even an ad, so not even a paid advertisement, but it somehow I knew what I needed. A little late, but CSI Linux, it looks like it could have been really helpful in our investigation. To begin with, CSI isn't the kind of distro you're going to install and use as your daily driver. And they don't even make it easy for you to do that, like Kali does. Even if you wanted to, it comes in as a virtual machine appliance. It's packaged for VirtualBox, VMware, or KVM QEMU. They also have a raw bootable triage image that you can DD over to USB or whatever. Which I suppose you really tried hard, you could DD that to a drive and make that your daily driver, but that's not what this is for. CSI Linux, it's packed with tools for analysis, threat detection and response, tools to help with online investigations, OSINT, social media, domain recon, dark web. It has the Tor browser like Tails kind of does. Getting your start with something like this seems like it might be a big lift. If you have no clue where to begin, well, you could start by downloading the virtual machine, checking it out. But after that, they have an Academy section on their site that includes a free CSI Linux certified investigator course and a test and some kind of certification at the end, all free. But if you need more, there are several other paid courses available along with the physical, at least one physical book. I haven't clicked through everything, but I saw they at least had one physical book you can purchase off Amazon for this. So lots of ways to learn, I guess. I plan to start out with the free one. I've already signed up for the free course, and it goes into a wide variety of things. I've skimmed. I haven't even broke the surface really, but it kind of helps you get an idea what's in CSI Linux, such as data recovery, incident management, memory forensics, malware analysis, encrypting and data hiding, software-defined radios, threat intelligence, threat hunting, and more. And looking at it here, it doesn't appear to be just a bunch of tools packed into a distro, but there seems to be a process built in, starting with opening a case. So for those watching, you can go here, you go to CSI Tools, you could start a case, and from there you can open an existing case, start a new case, and you set it all up, and it allows you to keep, if you have multiple cases of this, if you do a lot of this, it keeps all those tools and all the results and reports organized in a file, folder, directory for that specific case, so you don't get things mixed up. So, with that, I'm looking forward into digging into this more soon, and I may have more time since it kind of relates a little more to some things I kind of do in my desk job. I'm not a forensic, cyber forensic investigator, but I play one on TV. No, I don't do that either. But being an IT managed service provider, being an IT, everyone plays a role in security. And also looking at their site, it looks like they have a SIEM. What is that? A security information and event management appliance in the works. And something to kind of collect all your data. That's the kind of tool that a security operations center, or a SOC as it's commonly known as, would use. But it looks like that's very new, because the documentation has spots where it says more info here to come. So I'm kind of interested to check that out too. But this little distro here seems like it, I don't know, could be pretty helpful for those watching. You see, I just open a case, and then you can kind of go through the tools and I guess go in order of what you need and pick through them, or just do the course and whatever it tells you how to use it. I don't know how to use it yet.
No, these are super useful. I have also done that kind of response before, and what we would always do, what I've always encouraged people to do is, particularly if it's something high level, like you think it's an actual serious threat, take the hard drive out of the machine, put it in a Ziploc bag, seal it up, and then just throw a new hard drive in there and start from scratch. Because boy, I would not trust a Windows install, or a Linux install for that matter, that somebody malicious has been fooling around with. Because like you say, there could be stuff way deep down in there.
Everything's been wiped.
Yeah, there you go. And that's what you need to do. The other thing that I will say is call your local FBI field office on ransomware. They actually want to know about it, because they will go after these guys, but to be able to do so, they have to have cases. And for them to have legit cases, they've got to have like documentation about who it is that got you with the ransomware. And so they will make notes about, like what kind of ransomware it is, what the Bitcoin address is, what the payment URL is. And they actually, I was surprised to hear this, but they actually want to know this. Like, they want to know this enough that a local FBI agent called me back and is like, I need to talk to you while you're sitting in front of that computer. And so they had me come in, and I gave them all the information about the case. So just a note on the whole ransomware side of things. It was interesting. Jeff?
I am kind of surprised they want to know that. Yeah, that kind of hopeful.
Yeah. They try.
Yeah, maybe not a lot of hope, but at least they're making an effort.
Indeed,
they want to document it for their reports and their graphs.
Well, no. So when they actually do nab somebody, they then can tie, this ransomware group off to, and then they've got 1,500 or however many that they've documented. And they can say, well, it's not just one or two. We've got all of these documented when they go to court about it. And, you follow the news and they do occasionally get somebody and bring him to justice. So. All right. I've got a story about CentOS, sort of, about Rocky Linux. And there's also a little bit in here about Alma Linux. So the main thing here is Rocky Linux just put out, and so technically it's a CIQ, the company behind Rocky Linux, just put out a press release that says that they are now going to start supporting upstream stable kernels for Rocky Linux via, and this is kind of important, the CIQ Enterprise Linux platform. So for those that are not aware, Rocky Linux, Rocky and Alma are two of the options for running essentially Red Hat Enterprise Linux without a RHEL subscription. We would call them clones of what used to be CentOS. And as things have changed, these different groups have started looking at value adds, essentially. What can they do to make the experience a little bit better? One of the really interesting things that Alma Linux has done in the past is they will push security fixes faster than RHEL will, which is a little weird to see, but very welcome. Alma Linux has also very recently rolled out some hardware enablement support where RHEL has stopped building drivers, and Alma Linux, the guys there are like, well, it's just a switch when we compile the kernel. Why don't we flip it back on and give you back support for some of these different pieces of hardware, which is pretty neat to see. So now what CIQ is doing with Rocky is they're saying, hey, we're going to make it easier to run the latest and greatest kernel. So if you're on Red Hat 9, that's not going to give you a 6 dot something kernel. It's going to be whatever Red Hat has it snapshotted at, whatever the kernel version that Red Hat is supporting. And so if you're on this plan from Rocky, then you can be running essentially the latest LTS kernel, which is a lot newer than the old one. The reason that they talk about wanting to do this is for performance improvements in like big compute clusters. And one of the questions that is still kind of outstanding is this for everybody, or is this just for their enterprise customers? And, everybody could do this, but it's a question about how many hoops there are going to be to jump through to get it if you're not on their enterprise plans. So interesting stuff there with the two CentOS alternatives. Rob, you run some CentOS stuff, don't you? So obviously it's not CentOS anymore, but you've gone with either Rocky or Alma.
No, I don't.
You're all Ubuntu. That's right.
Yeah, my servers are Ubuntu.
That's right.
But I mean, the company I work for, some of the systems they have are CentOS. I haven't been in those. They're in the different departments. I haven't been in those for quite a few years, so I'm not sure what they're doing today.
I think it's cool though, because a lot of times when you have one of these stable distributions, oh yeah, this would be great to have this feature. Oh, but I'm on the super stable, which is running kernel something .ancient. And it just, maybe in 5 years that new hardware support will be there or whatever, so this kind of gives you the best of both worlds.
Yeah, I was just going to look real quick and see what. So on my EL9, I am running 6.1, which is actually not terrible. It's 6.1.31. And I don't think that is using a more. I think that is what the Enterprise Linux 9 is running. But we're up to, what is it? 6.9 is out now.
I think so.
6.8, 6.9, something like that.
6.8 I know is out. I think 6.9 is still on RCs.
Right. Yeah.
but probably next month, and then we'll start 6.10.
Yeah. So, a few versions, a few months ahead. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see. So let's kick it over to Jeff. Speaking of the kernel releases and 6.9 and eventually a 6.10, there's something brewing there, isn't there?
There is. And when you're running that Rocky and you want a modern kernel because you're thinking, you know what I need? I need a blue screen of death. Well, here you go. So the 6.10 kernel is going to be getting a blue screen of death. Now, some of you might be thinking, didn't we talk about this before? Your memory is sort of correct. We talked about previously a blue screen of death for System D. So it can give a blue screen of death on many things and issues where user space is alive, but it won't work for things like a kernel panic. So this blue screen of death will cover when there are issues with the kernel itself, because the blue screen of death is going to be in the kernel. So now some of you are thinking, but wait, the kernel can dump a kernel panic now. And while it's true, it only works if the VT/FBCon support is enabled. But there's been a lot of work to kill off the config_VT option. Basically, they want to get rid of that terminal. And VT is the terminal for the kernel. And it's been in there since the early 90s, has not changed much since then, and has very limited VT 102 compliance. In the article in the show notes, there are links to which talk about getting rid of the internal kernel console and try and farm it out to a user space version. And that rabbit hole can go fairly deep. So it's really good reading for those interested. I mean, some of the articles go back almost 10 years talking about issues and getting rid of it and, should we, shouldn't we? But bottom line is the kernel's ability to have a console built in has its days numbered. And there needs to be a new way to show issues that happen during a kernel panic, which is now we have code that's been submitted for pulling into the kernel when we have the 6.10 pull window open. Probably next month is the estimation on that. We have been saying blue screen of death, but the official name is the DRM kernel oops viewer. Yeah, I did say oops, OOPS. Red Hat has been working on the code, which would work with the famous blue screen of death. When there's a kernel panic, it would display what went wrong. Now, this has all been under review for the past few months and doesn't rely on the built-in kernel terminal at all. So now, before anyone gets too excited, though, it's still early in the process and only works with a few direct rendering manager drivers, which the article goes on to list. But if accepted, more drivers will support this feature. The article even goes on and shows how the code can be tested with a simple console echo to a file in a specific location. If you have pulled the code and compiled it into your own kernel, or you wait for 6.10 and have the required drivers, you'll be able to see how it'll look on your system. So let me know what you think on Discord. But by looking at the comments from the article anyway, no one thinks this is bad. People are up in arms about losing the kernel console, though it's been brought up that it is powerful, but you can't scroll back anymore since 2020. And people talk about how fragile it is and no one wants to mess with it and they would just rather get rid of it. So, but the other argument is people talk about the issue with relying on a user space solution. So there's some issues there. Now, they did have people testing it in the comments, and a lot of people were surprised that if you have a kernel panic, it doesn't give you the information anymore. It freezes on a black screen. So a lot of people that thought they could get kernel information on the old console were not actually getting it when they tested it. I think there was some confusion. People would find errors during the initial boot up when you could see the messages going by, but not when your system was fully up and you had a lockup. So, take a look at everything at the article linked in the show notes. Come on Discord. Let us know how you feel, what you think. We always welcome all feedback.
So it's funny. I'm thinking about this. If you lose the built-in console, what do you do when your machine has a problem? It's not a full kernel panic, but there's a problem. Because historically you can do Control F1 or F2 or whatever and get to one of those virtual terminals and fix things, even if, your display manager is completely dead. And I was just thinking through that. I was like, well, let's see. A lot of machines still have serial ports on them. So you could just get a dedicated machine off to the side and hang it on via serial, be able to do your debugging like that. And it's like, I have just reinvented dumb terminals.
so with this, you're saying, or they're saying, and you're interpreting this, that all F1, F2, those consoles just won't be there for you? Is that?
Yeah.
That's horrible. Sometimes.
I don't know for sure. Okay. Me personally, Jonathan, I think feels that way, but I don't know if that's the same terminal when you hit, the F1, F2.
Yes, it is.
Because a lot of people complain it needs a lot more updates, but it's like I said, everybody's afraid because they said, man, this code is fragile, that nobody wants to touch it.
Sometimes when I just want to focus, I just do a Control F2, F1, depending on the system, and just goes pure console some days.
So here's the thing to keep in mind. Getting rid of the in-kernel version of this does not mean that you cannot do this. It just means that there is going to have to be a user space replacement.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a display manager, if you're like a server, you're still gonna boot into a console of some kind.
Yes.
So it would be a user space console.
Well, I guess we'll see. I mean, maybe in 6.11 we'll get a Windows logo or something.
Oh my!
I don't know. Everybody thought like this. The blue screen was a great idea. It all boiled down to what happens to the kernel console. But keep in mind, like I said, some of these articles go back almost 10 years about getting rid of it. And one of the things was, how do you solve, getting information from your system and things like that. So I think once they have that worked out, that's when it'll finally go away.
Yeah, we'll see how it's implemented. I'll hold my criticism until that. I'll keep joking about it, whatever I can come up with to, make fun of it.
And one thing to keep in mind, folks, is the blue screen of death title moniker here is said tongue in cheek. It is intended to be a little bit more useful than the actual Windows BSOD, which is historically not the most useful bit of debugging information.
Is it going to be blue? I don't remember.
I don't even think it's going to be blue.
No, at least the example they show in the article is just, it looks like a regular console kind of dump.
The System D one, I don't remember. For some reason, I feel like I thought that was going to be blue, but maybe that's not blue either. I don't know. Maybe I got caught off with the name, but the tongue-in-cheek name.
Yeah, and
does it have a smiley face at least, like Windows?
No,
or is that a frowny face? I don't know. I don't remember.
I want a guru mediation like the old Amigas.
Well, see, that would be the ultimate in this is pick your own oops screen, make it look like however you want to. Give yourself guru mediation, or from any of the various systems over the days.
Old Apple or whatever you want.
Yep.
Well, yeah, it depends where they pull that from. If it's a binary, I guess you have to do the code and recompile it. But maybe it's just going to be some text somewhere. Either way, it's open source. If you want, you can. If you really want to do it, you can customize it.
One of the other projects I'm involved in, somebody was like, we have a bunch of settings, and somebody goes, we need to make an advanced mode, like a simplified mode and an advanced mode, so that we don't have all the settings for the simplified users. And the devs are like, so many of the users that have no business doing so are going to go into advanced mode. And like, just imagine the YouTube videos about it. Here's how to enter advanced mode for everybody. And like, okay, well, let's call it developer mode. I chime in. I said, guys, developer mode is changing it in the source and recompiling it yourself. Oh, all right, Rob.
You like my naming?
Yeah. openSUSE beats Fedora. Tell us about it.
Yeah. So with security incidents continuing to be on the rise, as you heard from my previous story, but not quite related to what I'm talking about here. Either way, reproducible builds have been continuing to grow in interest in the industry. Looking at a binary, it's hard to know exactly what code is compiled into that binary. Even though the program might be open source, it's difficult to know that binary you are using is made from the same source code you're looking at. Which is why, reproducible builds allows auditing to be done on those binaries. Historically, when source code is compiled into a binary, the binary is slightly different every time it's compiled. My understanding is this is due to pretty much everything on the machine, from timestamps to hardware to solar flares in the sun hitting your memory during compile time. Maybe it isn't that. I don't know. It's not my expertise. So that has made audits of binaries difficult to know if someone snuck some code at compile time and you're running something malicious that isn't in the source code. Mm-hmm. Many are working toward this goal to have more reproducible package builds. Fedora is aiming to have many of their builds reproducible in Fedora 41, which is due to come out near the end of the year, depending how late they are, closer or not as close to the end of the year, but they're always a little late. But openSUSE Factory has already achieved a significant milestone in bit-by-bit reproducible builds. Besides embedded signatures, openSUSE has been producing bit-by-bit reproducible builds for about the past month. They're still working through and verifying all the packages, but so far it's looking like over 95% have passed the reproducibleness of them. A quote from openSUSE's blog post on this says, "A recent example is that reproducible builds allow for the creation of proof simply by rebuilding and comparing the results that a GCC build whose source was extracted from a compromised XZ was not compromised." So, the previous story that was huge in the news about XZ. I added that. That's not a quote. Back to the quote, though. This process was achieved without needing to reverse engineer how the compromise occurred. Similarly, reproducible builds were reported as being useful during investigations of the XZ compromise. Reproducible builds enable collaboration that otherwise would not be possible by supporting more scientifically based arguments for security, which can be independently verified. So once again, openSUSE beats Fedora by roughly 6 months. Good job, openSUSE.
Oh, so I'm curious, Rob, if you know, why are builds not bit for bit reproducible already?
Well, I kind of implied it up above, or I didn't imply it. I did say that already. If you're listening, Jonathan.
No.
My understanding, like I said, it's kind of due to pretty much every variable in the machine, like timestamps and solar flares, who I joked about. But
he did say, and I quote, "I don't know. That's not my expertise."
I did say that too.
Of course.
I wasn't joking there.
Yeah.
I think that's a show title.
It might be. It might be, especially now that we're talking about it. Yeah. So there's a bunch of different reasons why builds are not necessarily bit for bit reproducible. But it boils down to the main reason is nobody really, when we first started doing all of this, nobody really thought about the need for it, is one of the big reasons. And so stuff is just happens, whether a timestamp gets built in or your system configuration gets built in. Maybe a MAC address gets built in for some reason to the binary, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, I thought some of the ways people tried to do it manually on their own in the past was like trying to always set the time of their machine to a certain time, which, I mean, that seems impossible to know that the compile is going to take the same amount every time because something else is running in the background.
Yep. Yeah, so it just boils down to this hasn't been a thing that was important to people for the longest time. And now suddenly, as we're getting into this unfortunate era where we have supply chain attacks against open source software, suddenly people realize that, hey, it would be really great if every legitimate build matched bit for bit. And that way we could compare them and see if anything weird is going on.
I'm rather curious how it's done. I mean, I understand in theory how a compile works. I mean, I don't know the deep inner workings of how that works. You know, there must be some reason why all those little variables of your system kind of get pulled into it. And so it makes me wonder, what are they doing to not? Are they feeding it fake data like, you know, all those different variables, some flat out fake data to keep it consistent, or are they just changing the compiler some way to ignore that? You know, I'm curious, but you know, I'm not going to understand it anyway.
Well, I know sometimes optimizations can also figure in.
Yeah.
And if you know, some of that, if you can force when it's going to optimize and when it's not, you know, a little more clearly, so it's less random.
Some of it is making changes to your compiler so that it does not include things like your system variables, your system description. Some of it is making changes to your build scripts and your tooling. I'm sure that they have messed around with things like, well, what if we do this in Docker? What if we do this in virtual machines? What if we set the time to exactly this when we start? I mean, I'm sure there's all sorts of things that have been done.
I suppose some of the original reasoning is they wanted maybe documentation in a way built into that binary, you know, kind of know when, where, what were the conditions. And, you know, just like anything you encrypt, that's going to obviously affect the overall file when it's one system like that. So maybe that's originally what the purpose kind of was, but that's not what's important to us now.
Yeah. So just for instance, one of the bugs that they linked to here is when they were doing RPM signatures, it was leaving behind a different amount of null padding depending upon like where it was being done and the different the different settings in the different system state. And so there's a bug report here. If you click through the stories, there's a bug report here where they talk about it. And it's like, well, what do we do about this? And it's like, well, how is one going to know what the previous one did? And blah, 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 blah. And so there's plenty of detail here. Anybody that wants to dive into it. It gets kind of hairy though, because you, like you say, you get down into compiler details. And compilers are black magic sometimes. Yeah.
They can be complicated.
Yes. So, yes, Jeff?
Oh, I was going to say, I've written a compiler before, a very, very simple compiler for work. And it was amazing, the complexity to handle all the different iterations of stuff. And I had, it was we'll say custom language that was very limited to what it could write. So, I mean, having something like a Rust or a C++ where there's hundreds of commands and combinations and, it just would be.
Out of everybody out of the normal people on this panel, aren't you the one who says you are not a programmer like the least, and yet you made a compiler?
Well, it was a special language that was, like I said, it was simplified and had very strict rules, and so I didn't have to deal with a lot of randomness.
What he's not telling us is that he wrote his compiler in Microsoft Excel.
Python.
I wouldn't know. I wouldn't know where to start. I don't know.
2.7. It was long. It was before 3 was really rolling. And I used to write tester code.
No, fun.
And so, but I can't do programming like you guys do with sitting on with C or something like that. It was when I say it was complex, but the language was very simple. I really mean that. It very limited keywords. It had a very strict syntax. It was actually
the finished
generated.
product was an actual binary though, not just translated into something else.
It was, yeah. It was kind of an assembly type language it was translated in that would then get converted to binary.
So let's move along to something else that is incredibly complicated that people get paid for. Writing GPU drivers. And there is a couple of really interesting bits of news in the GPU world. And one of those is Ben Skeggs, previously at Red Hat, previously the Nouveau or Novue, if you are us, the Nouveau kernel driver maintainer. He unexpectedly about 6 months ago stepped down, retired, we thought, from doing Nouveau. Well, the latest bit of news is that he is now an NVIDIA employee. And what's really fascinating here is as an NVIDIA employee, he is still sending in patches to the kernel for the Nouveau driver. And he is actually using his @NVIDIA email address to send patches to Nouveau, which is a little mind-blowing. As I said to, well, actually, my response to this was just the pig emote and then the wings emote, because we definitely have some pigs flying on this one. It looks like NVIDIA finally decided that they're going to put a little bit of resources into making the actual real open source kernel driver work for NVIDIA. I'm both gobsmacked and thrilled to see it. Yeah, it's going to be quite a thing if we actually get to the point where I can once again, in good conscience, say, yeah, you can buy NVIDIA for Linux machines. It works pretty well. Because that hasn't been the thing for a while, at least not in my experience. Now, some people have great experience with them, but I have not. And then the other bit of news that I found really interesting is there is the Rockchip. I think this is the NPU driver, so not technically GPU. This is the neural network thing, but it is coming along, and pretty interesting thing here. So on the Rockchip RK3588, which is, the one of the really performant ARM64 chips out there right now, it is doing object detection at 30 FPS, which is really pretty impressive. So a bit more kind of in that same driver space bit of news. But I think the big one here is the NVIDIA news. And I'm curious y'all's take on it. Maybe Jeff to start with, because he is actually our resident NVIDIA user.
Yeah, everybody sneers usually when they say that, but no, just I think it's good, and I think NVIDIA is seeing a lot of pressure, especially as some of their cards are getting used in the enterprise. Mm-hmm. When especially you get the higher end of 4080s, 4090s, they're kind of industrial cards as well. They're kind of crossing that advanced gamer to, you can use them for compute, and their advanced cards have open source drivers, the enterprise level. And I think they are trying to warm up to Linux more, because they don't want AMD or Intel, who are very open source minded,
yeah,
to get that extra leverage on them. And it probably doesn't hurt them either to say, hey, let's get this open source, and then we get a bunch of people fixing bugs for free for us. And
oh yeah, I would still love to know. You know what has to have happened here is some big customer went to NVIDIA and said, we would really love it if your video cards just worked with the Linux kernel and we didn't have to go through this dumb driver installation process. Like that's what had to have happened, right? NVIDIA did not just do this out of the goodness of their heart.
No, there's business reasons behind it. And money does talk. I mean, if you get somebody that's say, well, we're planning to buy, $100 million worth of cards next year, saying, if it doesn't do this, we're going to go somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And if that's big name suddenly drops NVIDIA and goes to AMD or Intel or whoever, not only does that a hit for them, it's a bonus for their competition and a bunch of advertising for their competition saying, why is big company X walking away from NVIDIA? Maybe we shouldn't be there either.
Yeah, I mean, it could be even just pressure in social media. People are really loud. You don't have to necessarily be a big billion-dollar company anymore to have a voice. So I know every time I see an advertisement roll across my feed, I am like, when are you going to open source that? Or
well, but somebody somewhere tied it to money.
Yes. I don't think let me put it this way. I have seen the graph for NVIDIA's earnings over the last few years. I don't think they care about what people say about them on social media. Everything has been green and go, and they are making money hand over fist.
Sure,
I don't
but
think
you
they
get
care.
enough bad press for long enough, it starts to get into the minds of people, including these big, rich companies with all the money that are buying from them.
I know what you're saying, but I think it also ties into that AMD and Intel are putting a lot of effort into AI, a lot of effort into their drivers, and I think they're concerned that if they say, we have Intel and AMD open source drivers, if they get the community behind them, I mean, you could have some amazing things come out of there, and it gets the people that aren't fully in those jobs yet or just starting out. Oh, I've got a lot of experience with the AMD or Intel side. It's open source. I can play with it. We can customize it. Why go with NVIDIA? And I mean, right now, yeah, they're ahead of the game, but 2 generations, 1 generation, maybe the playing field levels a little bit. And I think this is and NVIDIA is pretty good about looking down the road into the future. I think one or both of their competitors are scaring, or maybe not scaring them, but they're hedging their bets, trying to ward off getting steamrolled.
Yeah. And I think these are all likely possibilities, maybe not alone, the social media, if it was only that, or even what Jeff's saying, maybe the $1 billion one that you're talking about, Jonathan, could happen alone, but I don't see any reason why it's not necessarily a combination of all the factors kind of lining up.
Yeah, that's fair. Either way, we are glad to see it. And I am hopeful for a day that I can try an NVIDIA card. Well, I say that, and then looking here, I reach behind me. This is Lay NVIDIA card and a fun little adapter on the bottom of it. We may talk about this here in a few weeks once I actually finally throw it in. But this is a GT 710. Huh. It is the cheapest NVIDIA card. Well, it's actually the cheapest video card that I could find that doesn't need dedicated power. And need to go throw that in the server here before too long and see what happens.
I think I have something like that laying around somewhere around a 710. But yeah, like I said, I'm not an expert at this either. But I look forward to the day when I can give somebody a recommendation when they say AMD or NVIDIA. I'll be like, they're both great.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Throw
Hope
Intel
so.
in there too. Why not?
I mean, for certain things, Intel's the way to go right now, actually. Not very many things, but for a few things, Intel's the way to go.
And they've got the R&D to back them up.
That's true. That is true.
Like the budgets and the head count. And
Yep. All right. Well, let's continue on with the graphic card, the compute on the GPU sort of train here. And Jeff, what is up with ROCm?
Well, ROCm 6.1 is released for Ubuntu 22.04.4 support. And great. Okay, what is ROCm? So, for those that don't know, in AMD's own words, ROCm is an open source stack composed primarily of open source software designed for graphics processing unit and computation. ROCm consists of a collection of drivers, development tools, and APIs that enable GPU programming from low-level kernel to end-user applications. Basically, it's a suite of software designed to do computational tasks like CUDA does on NVIDIA, because CUDA itself is also not a single program. It's kind of a whole suite. Well, in this, with 6.1 coming out, it brings a bunch of new features and expands the supported OSs. Now, like I said, 22.04.4 is one of them. One of the features is ROC decode, which, I'll be honest, I hear some of these names in here, and I think of like it's almost like KDE, where everything has to start with a K. Here it's ROC decode, and there's a bunch of other ROC various words that for different libraries. But anyway, ROC decode, it's brand new, and it adds accelerated video decoding to the ROCm compute stack. And this is I'm going to paraphrase AMD when they said ROC decode provides a high performance video decode on AMD GPUs. It will allow decode of compressed video streams while keeping the resulting YUV frames in video memory. Because they're still in memory, there can be post-processing using the ROCm HIP module, HIP. But because it's in memory, that post-processing can happen without having extra data copies. So it saves moving a lot of extra data across the PCIe bus. So ideally, it's going to speed up your post-processing, because it doesn't need to bog down bandwidth and plug up your system with extra copies of the data. Now, I'm not going to list all the existing modules and libraries that have had improvements, but there's a lot, and you don't want to hear me rattle off that list. The composable kernel support adds better denoising for lots of AMD GPUs, so that's a bonus there. There is integration with the EPYC system management system, also known as eSMI. So basically, this gives user space APIs for monitoring and control of CPU features. There's a link in the article in the show notes, which has a link to the Git page of the announcement. And I do want to bring up that if you want to use ROCm, go there, and they have a requirements page which lists not only the supported OSs, which you need to have, but also which GPUs are supported. They also have a list of things they're looking at for 6.2, and they do have some OSs which they're going to end of life support, such as Ubuntu 20.04.5 and RHEL/CentOS 7.9. So the list of what they support changes all the time. So you need to look and compare what you have with what they support. So as always, please leave any feedback on the Discord server. We love to hear from you.
Yeah, one of the interesting things that is continuing to happen with ROCm is they are attempting to make it easier to package. So, for example, you can't go to Fedora right now and do a complete install of. I don't think, maybe this is a thing now. It's got, because it has gotten better. But of ROCm, there are still components of it that I last time I checked, they didn't quite exist, because it's just a pain to package. And if you go to the ROCm GitHub page, there are several bug reports about this where people are asking for, like the one I have pulled up right now, better documentation. It's like your documentation is all written around your script, your install script. And it's like, come on, let's be serious. We would actually like to package this. You can't do that. You need actual documentation. And the responses are essentially, we're working on it. But it does seem to be getting a little bit better as each version comes along. And so honestly, that is the thing about ROCm that I am the most looking forward to, is when the packaging situation gets to be really good. Because then at that point, there's not necessarily gonna be hey, we've made ROCm now work on Ubuntu 24.04. It's well written code and it'll just work everywhere.
Yeah, I agree. And it's coming along. I mean, it's been out for a while. You know, they've been working on it for quite a while, but it seems like they're still making very good improvements, and it's definitely making more than subtle changes. I mean, they're really investing time and effort into this. Yeah,
and one of the reasons is that CUDA is one of the reasons. This is intended to be an answer to CUDA, and that is NVIDIA's unfortunately proprietary graphical card language. Like, so you go to do compute, and CUDA is the most popular one. It's the one. It's the language that's easier to work with, way more powerful than OpenCL. And so that's one of the reasons why so much compute stuff is NVIDIA right now, is because people like CUDA. And AMD has been
uses it.
It literally is, isn't it? Yeah. And so AMD has been trying to chip away at that for a long time. Actually, AMD has been trying to work on that. And like you say, they're finally making some progress there.
Well, I think packaging is going to be huge, because with CUDA, when I'm using CUDA, there's a compute module that I just go to my package maintainer software and went, okay, I want NVIDIA compute. Boom, it installs, it's all there, and it just works. I'm not fighting any settings or anything like that. So, I mean, that's one of the reasons CUDA's so prevalent right now.
Yep. And there's some other stuff in ROCm that's going to be cool. Like Carl just mentioned in the chat that he likes the ROC decode, where you can decode compressed video streams and keep the resulting raw frames right in video memory. Like there's some cool stuff in there. And I could see that being useful for a whole bunch of things. And so we'll see, but I'm sure businesses are starting to look at AMD for this. Now, there's something else that I am interested in looking at, and that is, I need a tablet that is not the iOS tablet. It's the only one I have right now. And I have heard a rumor that Rob knows about an alternative that's a little bit more open source friendly.
Yeah. So, Jonathan, are you looking for a premium Linux tablet even?
Oh, I don't know about premium. Premium sounds expensive.
Well, it's like Keith in the Discord said about the NVIDIA cards, he wished they were a little cheaper. Well, I do wish this was a little cheaper. It's a little more than the cheapest iPad, but it's not too bad. But so coming later this year, you can get yourself a Voila. I watched the video. I listened to how they said it several times. Voila tablet. If you join their Kickstarter now, there's only not a lot of days left in their Kickstarter. So if you want this, jump on. I want to say 26 is what it was when I looked today. Maybe 12. I don't know. It wasn't a whole lot, but I know there was time by the time you see this. So if you want one, jump on the Kickstarter. And this is brought to you by the same folks that brought us the Voila phone. You can get it with the Voila OS, touted as the first Google-free, cloud-free Android operating system. I'm not so sure about that. I haven't looked deep into that. I thought there's been others around a long time, but maybe this has been around longer than I realized. But the one I am more interested in is the one that comes with Ubuntu Touch. So, yeah, like the price is a little more than I hoped, but it's not too bad. The device itself, it looks pretty nice, and it's starting around, if you hit the bottom Kickstarter, which is the tablet and a charger, and I can't remember a couple other little things. It's like $563 US, 528 pounds. It's everything is in pounds, and they have it converted to approximate US dollars. So it's apparently a Wall is apparently a company out of the UK, I guess. I didn't look at that in that either, but like I said, it looks pretty slim, pretty sleek. It's slim, lightweight design. The dimensions are in millimeters, I guess. 278. I didn't transfer this for us US folks, but I guess I'll let you do this. Translate, not transfer. 278.5 times 174 times 7.5 millimeters. So thickness is 7.5 millimeters. The video I watched, it looked like a pretty good size tablet. I wish I would have translated that. Somebody should translate that to inches for me. Which, funny here, looking at my next note, it's a spacious 12.3 inch quad HD display. I just copied this from their Kickstarter. Why can't they just stick with one measurement? So anyway, 2650 by 1600 pixels, 4 speakers for perfect loudness for movies and games, they say. Attachable keyboard for enhanced productivity. Powerful MediaTek Gaming G99 8-core processor. 12 gigabits of RAM and 250 gigabits of internal storage. That's not too bad. It's right up there with some of my lower end desktops. 13 plus 5 megapixel main camera and a 5 megapixel front camera, long lasting 10,000 milliamp battery, 2G, 3G, 4G cellular network, which around here, there's no 2G towers and 3Gs are going away, but cool for those who still have those, plus Wi-Fi, plus Bluetooth. And the following accessories are in the works: a backlit keyboard with bookcase, pencil for handwritten notes and sketches, screen protector, and a back shell with transparent material, many color options. So yeah, I watched the video. They have a nice little advertisement about how they are privacy focused. No Spiegel on there. In the video, they had a Google website, except for Google was changed to Spiegel, I think it was. So I didn't make that up. I know I'm funny and clever, guys, but not that one. So yeah, it looked pretty slick.
Yeah, the company's out of Germany. This looks fairly interesting. That's actually not a terrible price for a decent tablet. It's a little bit more than I'm gonna drop on a whim, but that's actually that it could be worse. It looks sleek from the pictures and the video. Yeah.
And there's 26 days to go in the Kickstarter. They've got a goal of $53,312. Now it's converted from euros, so that's why the odd numbers. Mm-hmm. And they've currently got $75,069. So they've more than met their goal, but they're still just short of a month.
Quickly. Yeah, because usually Kickstarter's launched and there's a total of 30 days. So they're like 4 days into it and they've already beat their goal. It's going pretty well for them.
Yeah, I mean, they said on their Kickstarter, and yeah, I've heard of them before. They have a track record of successful Kickstarter.
It is not their first product, which is a good thing. Sometimes you get these companies on Kickstarters, and not even companies, just individuals, and they go wildly successful, and like they cannot deal with the amount of success. Like it's the number of orders that come in are just so overwhelming that they either never ship it, or it's way late, or it's more expensive, or all kinds of stuff happens when Kickstarters go too viral and too crazy. So the fact that they've already shipped products is a good sign.
I feel like this one, like, it looks manageable. I think I saw around 115 backers when I looked. So 115 got that much money.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like I say, though, it's only 4 days into the Kickstarter and they have 26 days to go. And a lot of times these things are sort of, they do not scale linearly through the number of days. They tend to be a little not logarithmic, not linear. So the slope continues to speed up as you get to the end of it, and so your last 5 days you have as many people back as in the first 25 days. So they may very easily top $1 million with this. That's for a small business, that's a lot of traffic all at once.
And you got places basically free advertisement for them. We're kind of doing it here. And what was it? Phronix, I think is where I saw it. Or was it 9to5 Linux is where I saw it originally. So,
yep.
Well, and I'd like to point out, because I'm in manufacturing, you come up with a great idea and then you say, oh, okay, we got to have somebody build this for us because we're not going to do it in-house. The skill set, you might be able to design a wonderful product, but it's a completely different skill set to get it manufactured and what you have to look for and how you handle contracts. And that's a whole separate ball of wax right there.
Design for manufacturing, as they say.
And they've done it once, at least.
Yeah.
And
that's a huge help, because sometimes you come up with this great idea and you go, this is going to be so hard to make because of these certain, the design, or you got to have so much machining or whatever it is. The material doesn't machine well. It's a big deal.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious how finished the prototypes, I assume they were, that they use in the videos and pictures. I'm curious how finished those are.
Yeah, it's hard to say. It's like when you're watching the advertisements and they show the phone, and then you see the little small print at the bottom, screen images simulated.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'll say the video itself was nicely produced. It wasn't just some cheap made in the basement video like some like I'm doing right now.
Yeah. And literally the biggest thing is they've already had a product come out, so they've already dealt with this. So they probably already have contacts in the manufacturing. Oh, yeah. And because the other thing too is people think, well, I made this prototype. This is great. Yeah, but how long did it take you to make that prototype? You can't do that for 1,000 of these, or
yes.
Or if the cost is going to be 20x what you think it's going to be. And yeah.
Or what some people have run into is you go to check for parts availability. And you think, I may sell 100 of these. And you check, and so Mauser has 100 of these in stock. And it goes viral. And suddenly you need 100,000 of them. And there aren't 100,000 of those chips on the entire planet. You're stuck.
Yep. Or, okay, we need these. Okay, you could order them. You have a year lead time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's rough. I don't know how many people have followed David Murray, the 8-bit guy, and the X64, I think is what they call that. That is it's kind of a throwback, like a new retro computer based sort of around the idea of the Commodore 64. And when they were designing it, they went through all of this, and they had some people that actually knew what they were doing, apparently, because they've not run into a whole lot of problems. But one of the problems that they ran into is their music chips. It was a Yamaha something or other. The various websites said, oh yeah, there's 1 million of these things out there. And when they actually went to order it, they said, okay, well, we need 1,000 of those. And all of a sudden, all of the websites went, oh no, we don't have 1 million of them in stock. We have 5. And what they discovered was one particular warehouse had made an error in their stock numbers. And so it made it look like these things were just available everywhere. And what was actually happening is that this one error just had gotten propagated out to all of the different sellers of the thing. And so they had to do kind of a rev on their design because they couldn't get a hold of the audio chips for it. Mm. And the ones that they could get a hold of, a lot of them were fake too. That's a different problem.
Mm. And they quit making chips. People think, oh, I'll just get this chip. And it's like, no, where was the last call? Has it happened? Is it, what's the life of the chip? And once they quit making them, it's done.
Yeah. You do last calls on chips too?
Yeah. So
Do you turn the lights on and off? And
no, but there'll be a last call to suppliers where they say, okay, we're going to stop making this in, I'm just like, say December. Okay, you have to get all your orders in for everything you want, and we will make this and crank whatever people order until December, and then it's done. Because there's a cost to have it going, and if you say, well, you keep all the reticles and the recipes and everything, but it's a lot of time to fire everything back up, and you've got to kind of redo stuff and requal, and it's a lot of money. And if it's not a big runner, okay, buy what you think you're going to need for however long you think you're going to need it, because we're done. Mm-hmm. And you're competing with other parts.
Yeah, just about takes an act of Congress to get that line restarted at that point. Sometimes literally. Really,
well, but it boils down to a really, really big check.
Yep.
If you had Microsoft saying, we want you to make this old, in our case, it may be EDO memory. Mm-hmm. Okay, but here's what it's going to, we need, $500 million or what, I don't know. I'm making up numbers, but yeah. Okay. You want us to, okay. Well,
we can do that for you.
Yeah. It's just going to cost you an arm and a leg.
Yep. Yeah. Fun times. All right. Let's chat about, let's see. Oh, speaking of, did you do that on purpose? An arm and a leg? That just came naturally, didn't it?
I did not. I'm not the segue guy.
We're talking ARM. We're talking ARM 64 is what is up next. So it's not going to cost you an arm and a leg. It'll cost you 64 arms. There is a couple of bits of news. One is really old. The other one is very new, and then put them together, and there's something interesting. And I will start this by saying that people have joked for the longest time about ARM 64 and ARM boards in general, like the Raspberry Pi. They're great. The only problem is nobody makes a decent browser for it. And what that is kind of a reference to is that there are no ARM64 builds of Firefox, not officially, and there are no ARM64 builds of Chrome. You can build Chromium, but Chrome has that little bit of Google special sauce in it that some people hate and some people need. So the first bit of news is that Firefox is actually officially doing nightly ARM64 builds. So you can get your Firefox fix on your Raspberry Pi, on some of these other like Snapdragon-based laptops that are apparently about to start coming out, some fun things like that. So Firefox, and that's specifically for Linux, Firefox is going to be building ARM64. And then the other interesting bit of news that goes along with this is Google Chrome has just started back in January shipping nightly builds of ARM64 Chrome, but for Windows. And there is still no official Chrome ARM64 for Linux. Sad violin. For those of us that want to run Chrome, of course. But I think the fact that Firefox is now officially doing it is maybe going to push Google in that direction, and we'll see it with Chrome. I hope it would be nice to be able to get official Chrome builds on 64-bit ARM. So just an interesting little tidbit to be aware of there.
In fact, that's why you do not see Ken here tonight. He had to get that nightly build of Firefox for his Raspberry Pi 400.
It's all about Firefox.
He's running Raspberry Pi 5, not 400.
Oh, and 5.
I'm pretty sure. And distros will build it, and so you can still run Firefox. Like say you're on Fedora on ARM64. Well, Fedora has its own build system for Firefox, and they make that work. But what's new now is that you're getting official from Mozilla builds of Firefox,
and that's better. Official.
Raspberry 5, 6, 7, whatever it takes.
I mean, we trust Mozilla more than we trust Fedora to build our Firefox, right?
We do. I don't know that I would say that.
We trust Firefox. We don't trust their leadership, Mozilla's leadership.
I mean, yeah,
their CEO
but if they can do reproducible builds, we can verify that they're not slipping something in there.
Yeah, that's true. I would probably trust Firefox's builds a little bit more than Chrome's builds.
Because Firefox is not an advertising company that could greatly leverage their existing browser market to make a lot of money.
Yeah. But at least Google tells you that they're doing that with Chrome. It's not like they hide it.
Firefox is trying to find a lot of different ways to continue to make money into the future, and
I mean, that's true.
Maybe this is just one of them.
I don't know. Time will tell. All right, so let's talk AI code.
I know we don't talk about this much.
What's up?
But I think this is very forward looking. But Gentoo is saying no to AI code, meaning they don't want any code which has been generated from an AI. If you break it down, though, I think you'll see that where they're coming from. And like I said, I think it's forward looking. As mentioned in the It's Floss article, which is linked in the show notes, there isn't a month that goes by when you don't see an AI lawsuit about whatever AI generated thing, derivative of someone's, they created something which is derivative of someone's copyrighted material, and that AI didn't have permission to eat up the original material or learn from it, or they weren't supposed to, whatever. So Gentoo is taking a proactive approach by not waiting for a lawsuit. They want to avoid that altogether. This has been talked about for a while. Council member Michael Gorney first brought this up back in February and gave a few reasons. The first we touched on about many AI tools have been trained on copyrighted material. And Michael commented that a large language models, also known as LLMs, can create code where he describes as plausibly looking bull shingle. Note that last word was an editorial creative license on my part. It was what you think it was. The other concern was ethical, and he was basing it on energy resources needed to run these large models and concerns about layoffs and exploitation of IT workers. As with anything, there are details to hammer out. And finally, on April 14th, they had a vote, and it passed with 6 votes in favor and 0 against. So Michael was quoted by the Register, and it's a link in the article as well. I think it's a good PR move for Gentoo right now when a lot of projects are being enthusiastic about AI. I feel that many Gentoo users really appreciate the old school approach to software engineering, where humans matter more than productivity. Michael also goes on and says he admits that it won't be easy to tell human code written from AI code, but they want to put it out there what's acceptable and what is not. They did have a note in the motion that AI code could be revisited and marked as okay if they can prove there are no copyright, ethical, or quality issues. They want to make sure as the entire AI scene changes quickly, they have the ability to change as well. Now, all the concerns are met. They are more than willing to implement an AI tool and even say that could lead to higher quality code. So Gentoo isn't locking out AI forever. It's just until it can meet the criteria set forth. And personally, I think it's good to get ahead of this. And I think they did smart and left themselves out if there's a change in an AI model. It gives good code. It's not trained on copyrighted. It's ethical. Okay, they're willing to use it. So they're not saying never. And while I can see what they're saying about energy and IT people abuse, I think the biggest thing, and this is my personal editorial, is to not have a lawsuit for which to an open source group, it can be devastating depending on how deep the attacker's pockets are. So, I mean, you can have one of these big, huge media places that could just destroy an open source group because they just legally pound them into nothing. But I think it was a good forward-looking statement from Gentoo, and I think it's a smart decision for me personally. That's what I think. Any comments from my co-hosts?
So the thing that is the most interesting here is the application to Copilot, because that's Microsoft's GitHub thing, and we have somebody in the comments. Carl in the comments is essentially saying, what programming AI? What? And then he also makes the statement that only open source code can be used by AI. I unfortunately have news for you. Copilot, at least in the beginning, got trained on all of the available GitHub code, not just the open source stuff.
Even the private stuff,
yes.
You're saying, right?
Yes, GitHub. I don't know if this is still the case, but when it was first launched, it was trained on private repos as well. And then, AI can write code, and sometimes AI can actually write code that compiles and does what you want it to. Not all the time, but sometimes. It's actually fairly impressive.
I wonder. I mean, I don't disagree with them not allowing AI, especially the way things are. But I wonder, like in the future, if it's going to be harder and harder to not have code with some AI backed with just the way IDEs are going, and they're going to have them built in. I suppose there'll be niches out there for that need, but
yeah.
And I think some of it's just a legal defense too. Keep in mind that if, hey, we want to sue you. Hey, we already say we don't want this in here. If somebody snuck it in, we'll get rid of it because you said so. But, we were actively trying to stop copyrighted material in our source code.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's no way for it. If I'm writing code for something like, how do I do this? Hey, Copilot, how do I write this? Something real simple, and I just put that in there, and if it's real basic enough, it's not going to be a problem either.
There's a lot of questions about this, and so even you could get into the question of, well, how much code do you have to use at once from Copilot? So in that exact example, how many lines of code does it have to be for it actually to be copyrightable as opposed to fair use? And that's something that kind of played a role in the Java case, the big Android versus Oracle, I think it was. And when you actually got down to it, the number of lines of code that were copied was it was 11 lines of code, and it was all very, very functional code. And so the first court case, the one where the presiding judge actually had a clue, he threw that out and he said 11 lines of functional code. This is not even copyrightable. It's entirely fair use. So that to get answers on this, we will have to have court cases. And I kind of hate that is the way this is, but we are going to have court cases on what LLMs mean for copyright and some other questions, but that's the big one.
It could go down to what is a for loop, and it gives me 2-3 lines of code, however it formats it out is like.
Yeah, but to answer some of these real basic questions about it, though, where it is going to have to be tested in court, does running anything, but in this case, computer code, through the LLM, the large language model, through that learning algorithm, is that enough? Is it transformative enough that it can be essentially a new copyright, or is it a derivative work? I believe that's how the legal jargon would go. And what that boils down to is, are we violating the copyright of this code? Particularly if it's not open source, if it's not already in public domain, are we violating the copyright of it to pull it into an LLM? And so far, we've not gotten enough legal cases that have looked at that and made that decision. And maybe that'll also have to be laws written about it too. I don't know. It'll be a combination of the two, I'm sure.
Well, and that's how Gen 2 is going to have to enforce it too. It's going to be more of a recommendation to an extent, but then at some point, knowing that if a lawsuit comes out of it, that's where it goes back to.
Yeah.
Well, and I think you could even probably take a lot of analogies from some of the patent type stuff, where how trivial is it? I mean, okay, some AI tells you how to make a for loop, but that's pretty basic. I mean, it's how would you say you didn't get that from just some code book or an example on the internet, or how, because you could even look at when Oracle was trying to, I think it was Oracle, or one of them was trying to sue Linux for a specific thing that was how Linux did something. And they said, no, it's totally how we did it. It was one of those, or maybe it was SCO. It was one of the patent troll companies. And this was probably 10, 15 years ago, but it is basically only one way to do what they claimed was theirs. And I think that's where you're going to run into, if you say, hey, I need a library, let's go back to RockM. I need a library to decode compressed video, and it writes one, then you're going to have a lot of, wait, this really looks like you have a complex piece of code versus, oh, it's a for loop, or it's a comparator or something, and that's where I think the minutia is going to come into it.
Yeah. And I'm not even questioning the legal aspect of it. I mean, yeah, that's how this will play out. I'm just saying, technically speaking, if I do that and I commit it to Gen 2's code, technically I'm breaking their terms, unless they actually clarify that deeper on there. But if their terms are no AI used in their code, technically I am. It's like, oh, I forgot how to do a for loop. Well, I'm just going to ask here quick.
Yeah.
Technically.
Yeah, well, so I mean, you could make the argument, isn't Google run by AI now? And if you look it up on Google, aren't you violating it? I mean, so there's kind of a reduction to absurdity argument that you can make there. And I don't know. That's definitely not what they're looking for. That's not what they're after.
My intelligence is artificial, so.
Well, and even in the article, the person that proposed it, Michael, even says, yeah, they're going to have a hard time telling what was AI and what was somebody writing code.
It's not going to be enforceable until a lawsuit comes in. I mean, it's going to be impossible to tell.
Well, so some code submissions they're going to look at and be able to tell this was not written by a real person. This was written by AI. Well, because some of them they're just going to be ridiculous. But yeah, when
Jeff's code. Why would anybody do this?
Yes, that's a valid question. Well, no, but I guess the other interesting thing about this is there are a lot of people right now trying to figure out, how do you determine if something was made by AI? So when you're talking images, text, is there a way, like, so in the academic world right now, they're going nuts trying to figure this out. How can we feed a student's essay into something and determine, was this essay written by ChatGPT or is it original work?
I thought that existed, but
there's been
I don't know
attempts
that
at
Wells works, but
it doesn't work well, but there are attempts at it. But I mean, this is something that in a lot of different realms is very much needed. And I don't know, it may always be a cat and mouse game as the AI gets better and then the AI detecting AI gets better. And I don't know, we'll see what happens. Oh, fun.
Yeah, and right now, the easiest way to tell is when you have, I've seen somebody write something that they write at, whatever grade level, and then they send an email and it's like, well, this is a doctoral thesis. They don't use these words,
one of the more fun things that I've seen suggested is the email will eventually, and we're almost there, email will eventually devolve into one person writing bullet points and ChatGPT turning it into prose. And then on the other side, ChatGPT turns that prose back into bullet points. And that is what email will eventually consist of.
I like bullet points.
Just send the bullet points to the email. I don't care.
Yeah. Save a step.
Indeed. All right. We have covered the big stories. Let's get into some big tips. Big command line tips. Command line tips. Not GUI applications, guys. Command line tips. Well, we'll see. We allow the occasional GUI application. It's just got to run on Linux.
On Linux? Oh, man.
Yeah.
In our show notes says tips. It does not have the word command there.
I got to go and fix that. Got to do Rev version 2 of the show notes template. All right, Rob is up first. What do you have for us?
All right. So for those of you who caught my tip last week, you may have seen Nmon in the background, or actually I talked about Nmon showing my processors. So I'm going to show you that app Nmon itself. And here it is. This is just a Debian install I have. It was just an apt getaway. And so with Nmon, it's as simple as you run Nmon, and then it's going to give you all the little things you can do. You can show the CPU, the memory, the disk, the network, utilizations, various other things. So I'm just going to do like I did last week. If I hit C, it's going to put the CPU up there. And now if I hit M, it's going to add the memory right onto the same screen. So I can monitor this all at the same time. I want to do disks, put that on there. It's going to collect that data. And I said, now, you know what? I don't want disks. So I'm going to hit D again to remove disks. And I'm going to put network up there instead. And it's going to do my networking. And I'm going to change my mind. You know what? I do not want CPU or memory, but I want to show top processes. So I'm going to do T for top processes. And that's just basically it's top. But you can view all that. So you can set up a little dashboard with Nmon, and you just have that stuff going and watching it on your server or whatever else you want it on. Real slick.
It's build your own top alternative.
Yeah, pretty much.
I like it. That's actually really useful. All right. Yeah. So I was reviewing from last week, and I actually discovered there was an error made in my command line tip. No, not last week, week before last. I talked about XFS_grow, and when preparing for doing it this week, I realized that is not actually the right command. You want to use XFS_growfs to grow a file system. And apparently, and it's funny looking through the history, because I did this on the machine the first time, and I'm doing it a second time to make sure that I have the command line tips right. And the first time, according to my history, I was able to just run XFS_growfs. And this time when I went to repeat those steps, I got the error message that XFS_growfs only works on a mounted XFS file system. Okay, fine. So you may run into this too. If that's the case, just make a temporary directory, mount your device. So in this case, it's like it's /dev/CentOS/home. That's what we've been working on this whole time. Mount it, run the XFS_grow command, and then you just use an unmount and then your whatever you called it. So, unmount TMP. Then, to continue to undo all of this so that you're back to a usable disk image again, you want to run lvchange --an, which is saying I want to deactivate it. So active no, and then that device, so /dev/CentOS/home. And then you also want to run a vgchange -an to deactivate the volume group. And then finally, you can run losetup-d to delete the /dev/loop0 device. And with that, you should finally have, again, your virtual disk image that is not being used by anything. And you can actually go in and remount it, restart your virtual machine, and you have whatever amount of extra disk space that you have given it. And so if you put all of these together, we have gone through the process now of growing disk space for a virtual machine, which has a lot of steps to it, particularly if you're using logical volumes. I must admit, I have partially gone through this series just so that I have a place to be able to go back to the next time that I need to do it, because I never can remember all the steps. So Jeff is up next. Jeff, you've got... well, this one is, I was going to say it's hard to wrap my mind around, but that's not quite what I want to say. I'm having trouble getting a hold of this. Let's put it that way.
I can't understand it.
Yeah.
My tip for today is a program and not a command line one, though you could argue you could run it from the command line, which would make it a command line program, but it opens its own GUI. So advanced command line tip? I don't know. Anyway, Obfuscate is an open source privacy tool, which is my tip for today. And the tool is for times when you want or need to share an image, but you don't want everything to be visible. Now, it wouldn't be too hard to manually edit the image yourself, but the goal of Obfuscate is to make it quick and simple, especially if you have to work with several images. So there's two modes. One is the fill, which gives you the black boxes you've seen before in movies and TV when they show a redacted bit of information, kind of just black sections. The second is blur, but they do pop up a warning when you use it that it isn't secure. Mm-hmm. Blur would be to hide things that are not sensitive, but you don't want it to be the focus of an image. Like you have a picture of somebody, but you don't want something in the background to maybe draw your eye away. So you can blur it so that you focus on the person or the object that you have in your image. It's really simple. And this is the whole thing. It's made to just very few options, very few things. And after you make your changes, you can either save the new image or you can copy and paste it to where you need it. And, it's not a lot to talk about because it's made to be really quick. So there's just a few options, easy to use, simple, small, focused. It's mostly written in Rust, and it's actually part of the GNOME Circle, which are approved GNOME applications and libraries that work well with GNOME, but are not actually part of the core install. So if you want quick ways to redact or blur some images, give Obfuscate a try.
So with Obfuscate, I'm real curious. Does it also do metadata cleanup? Do you know?
That I don't know.
So I'm in the article that's linked here. The author says that he was using this in tandem with metadata cleaner. So it kind of makes me think that it does not. So that is something to be aware of. Like depending upon what you're trying to achieve, sometimes you have things in an image metadata that can be really problematic, like your exact geolocations. If you don't want people to know where you're at, but your image includes your GPS location, then that could be a problem.
Right. Yes.
So
Very
just
true.
something to be aware of. Fun.
But I did like it saves a new image or you copy the image. So it's not, you can't, it's not like a layer that you can remove the.
Right.
Oh,
yeah. There have been some fun times that has happened where the government has released things that have been redacted and you can just like copy the text from underneath the redaction layer and paste it somewhere else and read what it says. That's happened a few times.
Yeah.
Oops. All right. Well, it has been fun, guys. That is pretty much our show. I'll let each of you get in the last word. If you have something you want to plug, we will start with Rob. What do you have for the end of the show?
all I have to say is my usual. Come connect with me, robertpcampbell.com. And from there, you can find links to my LinkedIn, my Mastodon, and a place to donate a coffee. And I also want to thank
Jim.
I want to thank Jim here for donating a coffee to me last week after the show. So thank you, Jim.
First coffee. It's in the books.
You got one.
I'm drinking it now.
There you go. All right, Jeff.
Nothing much this week. So just a poetry corner. The code was willing. It considered your request, but the chips were weak. Have a great week, everybody.
All right. And the only thing that I will plug, of course, is you can find my work over on Hackaday. You can follow me on Twitter. I've got it down here at JP_Bennett, Twitter, or X, formerly known as Twitter, the website formerly known as Twitter. Yeah, there's links to all kinds of other stuff from there. But the security column and Floss Weekly over on Hackaday are the two big things that we like to let folks know about. Thank you, everyone. Those that caught us live, we had good chat going on in the various places, and thank you to everyone watching on the download. We sure appreciate you all, and we will see you next week on the Untitled Linux Show.